I have painted the front gates of Kestrel Court for 41 years, and in all that time, I never once got the light right. That is the truth. People walk past my little folding table on the square, they see the small watercolors clipped to my string, and they say, "Oh, how lovely, how did you capture it so well?" And I smile and I take their coins. But I know that the gray of that stone changes 11 times before noon, and no paint ever made yet can chase it fast enough. Some mornings the palace is the color of a dove's wing. By the time the bells ring 10, it has gone hard and cold, like a knife left out in the frost. And by evening, when the lamps come up along the railings, it turns almost gold, almost warm, almost like a place where ordinary people could live. I tell you this because I want you to understand that I am not a woman who misses things. 41 years of starring at one building teaches you to see. My hands have gone bad now. The knuckles are swollen like river stones, and some days I cannot hold the fine brush at all, but my eyes are the same eyes I was born with, and they have never lied to me. So when I tell you what I saw that morning, the morning the youngest princess was found on the floor, you must believe that I saw it plain, not from a rumor, not from the papers who got it wrong anyway, the way they always do. I saw it with these eyes from my table, 40 feet from the outer gate, close enough to hear a young man's boots break the oldest rule in that whole kingdom. But I am running ahead of myself. An old woman does that. Let me go back to the beginning of the day, because the beginning matters, and I will tell it slow. It was a Tuesday in the middle of autumn. I remember it was a Tuesday because the flower market sets up on Tuesdays at the far end of the square, and the whole place smelled of cut chrysanthemums and wet cardboard and the diesel from the delivery vans. There had been rain in the night. The cobbles were still dark with it, and here and there a puddle held a little broken picture of the sky. Cold, but not bitter. The kind of cold that wakes you up rather than the kind that wears you down. I had set my table where I always set it, under the bare lime tree, and I had my flask of tea and my box of paints in my bad hands, and I was, as usual, waiting for the tourists. They come early, the tourists. They come for the changing of the guard, which in Corvin happens at 11, and they gather at the railings an hour before like pigeons who have heard about bread. That morning there were maybe 200 of them by 10:30. Families mostly. A school group in matching yellow caps, all holding a rope so they would not scatter. A pair of newlyweds taking photographs of each other in front of the gate, laughing every time a gust caught the bride's coat. An old man in a wheelchair with a blanket over his knees, wheeled up close by his daughter, who kept adjusting the blanket though it did not need adjusting, because that is what you do with your hands when your heart is full. And behind the black iron railings, still and straight and gray as the stone behind them, stood the guards. Now, I want to tell you about the guards because you have seen them, even if you have never been to Corvin. You have seen men like them. They stand at the gates of every old palace in the world, dressed in the heavy dark coats and the tall caps, holding their long rifles at rest, and they do not move. That is the whole thing. That is the wonder of them to the tourists, they do not move. A child will make faces at them. A man will stand 2 inches from their nose and shout to make them flinch. Girls blow kisses. Boys try to make them laugh. And the guards look through all of it, out over the heads of the crowd, at something none of us can see, and they do not so much as blink. People think it is a trick. It is not a trick. It is training so deep it has gone into the bone. I have watched these men for 4 decades, and I have seen what it costs them. I have seen a young guard stand through a downpour so hard the water ran off the peak of his cap in a rope, and he did not move to wipe his face. I have seen one stand while a wasp crawled across his cheek. They are taught that the stillness is the honor. That to break it, for any reason short of the end of the world, is to shame the coat and the name and the whole long line of men who wore it before them. I say all this so that later, when I tell you what the young corporal did, you will understand exactly how big a thing it was. His name I did not know it that morning, but I learned it after, and half the kingdom learned it after. His name was Ewan Hale, Corporal Ewan Hale. He was young, very young, I thought, watching him. There is a way that the young ones stand that is different from the old ones, though a stranger would never see it. The old guards have made their peace with the stillness. They stand inside it like a man stands inside his own coat. The young ones are still fighting it a little. You can see the effort in the set of the jaw, in the way the breath goes careful and slow. Hale had that. He stood at the left of the main gate, at the post nearest my corner of the square, and I had been painting him on and off for a few weeks by then, without ever knowing his name. I liked him. I will admit that. Painters have favorites, and I had made him mine. He had a good face for it, not handsome exactly, but honest, with a straight nose and a chin that jutted out just slightly, as if he were always about to say something and always deciding not to. And there was one small thing about him, one thing I had noticed and no one else had, because no one else watches the way a painter watches. When the smallest children came to the railings, Hale's eyes moved. Not his head, never his head. If you had been standing right beside him, you would have sworn he was carved from the same stone as the wall. But I was 40 feet back, and I had my little folding telescope, the brass one my husband left me, and through it I had seen it more than once. A very small child would toddle up to the railings, and the child would look up at this enormous still man in the tall cap, and something in Hale's eyes would soften. Just for a moment. Just a flicker. Then it would pass, and he would be stone again. It told me something about him, that flicker. It told me he was a man who had not yet managed to lock the whole of his heart behind the drill. And I thought, an old woman thinks foolish things, I thought, that one will either break, or he will become the best of them. There is no middle road for a heart like that in a coat like that. I did not know how right I was, or how soon I would find out. Now let me tell you about the princess, because you have to know her a little before I can make you feel what happened. Her name was Elowen. She was the youngest of the royal children, and at that time she was 9 years old, going on 10. The people of Corvin were soft on her the way people are always softest on the youngest and the smallest. Her older brother was to be king one day, and everyone respected him, in the cool way you respect a thing you have not yet been given a reason to love. But Elowen they simply loved, plain and easy, the way you love a bird that comes to your window. She was not a strong child. That was known quietly, in the way things are known about royal families everyone knows and no one says. She had been born early and small, and there was something with her heart. I never learned the proper name of it, and I would not repeat it if I had. But you would see her sometimes at the public days, standing beside her mother, and there would be a paleness to her, a blue tiredness under the eyes that did not belong on the face of a child. And then she would catch sight of a dog in the crowd, or a baby, or a man juggling for coins, and her whole face would open like a window thrown wide, and you would forget the paleness entirely, and so, I think, would she. She liked the guards. This was well known. There was a story the papers had run a year or two before, one of the few they got right, about how the little princess, when she was very small, had been frightened of the guards, of these huge, still silent men, and had cried at the gate. And how the king, instead of hurrying her past, had walked her right up to one of them and had her look at his face until she understood that there was a person inside the stone. After that, they said, she was not frightened any more. After that she loved them. She would wave at them on her way in and out, a small, serious wave, and though of course they could not wave back, the whole kingdom liked to imagine that the guards knew and were glad. I tell you all of this, the painter, the guard, the little princess with the tired heart, because these 3 threads were about to be pulled tight together into a single knot, on a cold, bright Tuesday, in front of 200 strangers, and I was the one holding the telescope. It began, as the worst things do, with nothing at all. Around 11:15, the crowd began to thicken, and hum the way it does before the changing of the guard. The school group in the yellow caps was herded closer. The newlyweds gave up their photographs and found a place at the railings. Somewhere a busker started up on a fiddle and was quickly moved along by one of the square constables. The flower seller at the far end began packing early, as she always did, because the crowd blocked her customers. And a car came up the inner drive of the palace. Now this was ordinary. Cars came and went from Kestrel Court all day. But I remember this one because it came fast, faster than the slow, careful pace the palace cars usually kept, and it did not go around to the far side where the family came and went in private. It stopped, instead, at the inner steps, the ones you could just see through the main gate if you stood at my corner and the light was right. I was not really watching. I had my brush in my bad hand and I was trying, and failing, for the 11,000th time to catch the gray of that stone. But I looked up, the way you do, and I saw the car stop, and I saw a woman get out of it in a great hurry. It was one of the household women, a nanny, or a lady who minded the children. I could never tell them apart in their plain dark coats. She got out before the car had fully stopped, and she went up the steps two at a time, which no one at that palace ever does, and she disappeared inside. And I remember thinking it, clear as anything. I thought, something is wrong in that house. I cannot tell you how I knew. 41 years, maybe. You watch a place long enough and it becomes like a face to you, and you learn its expressions, and you know when it is smiling and when it is holding its breath. The palace was holding its breath. The stone had not changed. The flags had not changed. But something behind the windows had gone taut, and I felt it the way you feel a storm 3 hours before the first cloud. I put my brush down. I picked up my husband's brass telescope, and I trained it on the main gate and on the young corporal standing at his post because, and I did not understand this until much later, because if something was wrong in that house, then he was the one who would be closest to it. He was the one at the door. Hale had not moved. Of course he had not moved. He stood exactly as he had stood for the last 3 hours, tall and gray and still, his eyes out over the crowd, his rifle at his shoulder, the picture of a man for whom nothing in the world was happening. But I was watching close now, and through the brass I saw the thing that the 200 tourists, laughing and pointing and holding up their little cameras, did not see. I saw a household man appear at the top of the inner steps behind the gate, and I saw him look not at the crowd, not at the sky, but at Hale, straight at him. And I saw the household man's mouth move, just a few words too far for me to hear, but I did not need to hear. I have watched faces for a lifetime. I know what a face looks like when it is carrying bad news and does not know where to put it. And I saw Corporal Ewan Hale, who had not moved a muscle in 3 hours, who was trained in his bones never to move, do a thing I had never once seen a guard at that gate do. I saw his head turn. Just an inch, just enough, toward the steps, toward the household man, toward whatever was happening in that house. And in 41 years of watching those gates, that 1 inch was the loudest thing I had ever seen. The crowd did not notice. Why would they? An inch is nothing, a trick of the light. But I had the brass to my eye and my heart had already begun to climb up into my throat because I knew the way the palace knew, the way the household woman on the steps knew that the day had cracked open and that something was coming through and that the young man at the gate had just heard it coming. He held for one more moment. One. I counted it without meaning to. Then the household man said one more word, and this time I caught the shape of it on his lips, and the shape of it was a name. The shape of it was Elowen. And the stone came alive. I have thought about the next 30 seconds more times than I have thought about anything else in my life. My own wedding. My husband's last morning. None of it I have turned over as often as I have turned over what Corporal Ewan Hale did between the ringing of that name and the moment the medics came running. So let me try to give it to you the way it happened, in order, though it did not feel like order at the time. It felt like a single thing, all at once, the way a fall feels. The name reached him, and the stone came alive. He did not run at first. That is the part people always get wrong when they tell it back to me, the ones who were there, the ones who have decided over the years that they saw more than they saw. They say he bolted the instant he heard. He did not. I had the brass to my eye and I saw the truth, and the truth is stranger and better than the story. What he did first was turn his head fully to the household man, and ask a question. I could not hear it, 40 feet and the crowd humming and the fiddle somewhere. But I saw his lips move one short question, and I have always believed, I will believe it till I die, that the question was where. Not what is wrong, not is she all right. Where? Because a soldier's mind, even a frightened one, goes first to the thing it can act on. You cannot fix what is wrong. You cannot mend a child's heart with your 2 hands, but you can go to a place. You can put your body where it is needed. Where? The household man pointed. Back into the left, toward the west wing, the part of the palace you cannot see from the square at all, the part that holds the family's own rooms. And that was when Ewan Hale broke his post. I want you to understand what that means still, even now that I have told you. That coat he wore was 300 years of men standing still. Every one of them had stood through rain and cold and mockery and grief, because the standing was the whole of the thing. The standing was the promise the coat made to the kingdom. We do not move. We are always here. Whatever else falls, this does not fall. To leave the post was not like a shop clerk stepping away from a till. It was closer to a priest walking out in the middle of the words. It was the breaking of something that was not supposed to be able to break. He broke it. He turned from the gate and he ran. And here is the thing I have never been able to make anyone feel. Though I have tried, the crowd cheered. They did. God help them, they did not know. They saw a guard suddenly move, suddenly come to life and stride off at speed, and to 200 tourists who had come to watch men who do not move, a man who suddenly did was a marvel, was the changing of the guard come early, was a show. Some of them clapped. The school group in the yellow caps went up on their toes to see. A child shrieked with delight. The newlyweds turned their little camera to follow him. And Ewan Hale ran through all of it with his face gone white, ran along the inside of the railings toward the corner of the wing, and I do not think he heard a single clap. I think the whole square had gone silent for him. I think there was nothing in the whole world for him just then but a direction and a name. He rounded the corner of the west wing, and he was gone from my sight. Now I have to tell you the next part secondhand, and I hate that, because I told you at the start I would only tell you what I saw with my own eyes. But this part I did not see, and yet I know it, because within the week I had heard it from 3 people who were inside that wing, and their tellings matched. And when 3 tellings match, you may as well have seen it yourself. So I will give it to you, and you may take it as I took it. Inside the west wing, in a long gallery that runs beside the family's private stairs, the little Princess Elowen was on the floor. She had been coming down the stairs. That was all. She had been coming down for her morning lessons, ahead of the woman who minded her, and on the 3rd or 4th step from the bottom her heart had done the thing her heart sometimes did, the thing with the tired blue name I will not repeat, and the world had gone soft and gray around her, and her legs had simply stopped being legs. She had not tumbled the whole flight, thank God. She had gone down the last few steps and folded onto the cold stone of the gallery, and she had struck her head, not badly, but enough, on the edge of a low table as she went. And there she lay, 9 years old, a little heap of a girl in a gray pinafore, with her hair come loose from its band and one shoe half off, and a thin line of blood at her temple, and her chest going too fast and too shallow, on the floor of a palace with 600 rooms, and in that first moment, not one single soul beside her. The woman who minded her had gone up the stairs, you remember, I saw her, going up 2 at a time because she had heard the fall and could not at first find where it had come from, the palace being what it is, all echo and stone. She was somewhere above, calling the child's name into the wrong corridor, and the household man had run the other way, out toward the gate, toward the nearest strong pair of hands he could think of, which was the guard. So it was Hale who came in first. Hale, who had run the length of the railings and in through the west door a household servant held open for him, and down the gallery with his cap gone. He had lost it somewhere, or thrown it, no one could say, and his boots loud on the stone where for 3 hours he had made no sound at all. They say he stopped when he saw her. Just for a breath. They say the big young guard, who had come in at a dead run, stopped dead at the mouth of the gallery when he saw the small shape on the floor, as though the sight of it had struck him. And then they say he crossed that gallery faster than any of them had ever seen a man cross a room, and he went down on his knees on the hard stone beside her. And this is the part that undid me when I heard it. This is the part I painted 100 times after and never got right. He did not grab her. He did not shake her. He did not shout. He took off his coat. That heavy dark coat. The coat that was the whole of the rule. He got it off his shoulders in a single motion, and he laid it over the little princess where she shivered on the cold floor, and only then, with her covered, did he do the rest. He put 2 fingers to her throat, the way the drill teaches you, feeling for the beat. He put his cheek down close to her mouth to feel for the breath. He said her name, Elowen. They heard him say, Elowen. Can you hear me? In a low, steady voice, the voice you would use on a spooked horse. A voice with no fear in it at all, though his hands, they said, his hands were shaking so hard he could barely keep the 2 fingers still. And with the other hand he reached to the radio clipped at his shoulder, the small black one all the guards carry, and he called it in. I have heard what he said. It went out over the household channel and half a dozen people heard it, and every one of them tells it the same, word for word, because it was the kind of thing you do not forget. He said, medics to the West Gallery. Now it's the little one. It's Elowen. She's down and she's breathing wrong and I need you now. And then, they say, he said one more thing, quieter, not into the radio, down close to the child's face, not knowing or not caring that the radio was still keyed open and carried it to every ear on the channel. He said, I've got you. I'm not going anywhere. I've got you. Now, back out in the square, I knew none of this. I only knew that my favorite guard had run around the corner of the West Wing with a white face, and that the palace was holding its breath, and that a child's name had crossed a man's lips like a stone dropped in a still pond. I stood at my little table with my husband's telescope in my 2 bad hands, and I could not have painted a line to save my life. And then the ambulances came. They came from the far side, from the road that runs behind the palace, but you could hear them from the square, 2 of them, then a third, the sirens climbing over the rooftops and echoing off the stone until it seemed the whole city was crying out at once. The crowd's mood changed then. You could feel it change. The clapping had long since died, and now a kind of quiet fear moved through the 200 of them, the way a cloud shadow moves across a field, because sirens at a palace are never a show. Mothers pulled children closer. The old man in the wheelchair took his daughter's hand. The newlyweds put their little camera away and stood there holding onto each other, no longer laughing. Nobody knew what had happened, but everybody all at once knew that something had and that it was bad, and that the young guard who had run, perhaps he had not been putting on a show after all. Perhaps he had been running toward it. I heard a woman near me say, to no one, to the air, I hope it's not one of the children. And I could not answer her. I had my telescope up in my heart in my mouth, and I was looking at the empty gate where Hale had stood, the empty patch of gray where for 3 hours a still man had been, and I was thinking, he heard it coming. This morning he heard it coming, and I saw him hear it. And now he is in there on the floor with whoever it is, and God be good to him, and God be good to them. Inside, and again I give you this second hand, and again I trust it. The medics came pouring down the West Gallery with their bags and their board, and they found the young corporal on his knees in his shirt sleeves in the cold, his coat over the child, his fingers still at her throat, his voice still going low and steady, I've got you, I've got you. And they found the little Princess Elowen with her eyes open. She had come round. Somewhere in those long minutes, with the great weight of that coat over her and a strange young man's low voice in her ear telling her he had her, she had swum back up out of the gray and opened her eyes, and the first thing she had seen was his face. This huge guard she half knew, this stone man she used to wave at, kneeling over her with his cap gone and his coat gone and his eyes wet, holding onto her hand as if she were the last real thing in the world. They say she looked up at him. And they say, the medics say, who had no reason to invent a thing, being busy men with a sick child to save, they say she smiled at him. A small tired smile, from a child who had frightened everyone half to death and did not yet know it. And they say she said, in a whisper, the only thing she said before they lifted her onto the board and carried her away. "You moved. You moved." Because she knew. Even 9 years old, even gray and sick on a cold floor, she knew what the guards were. She knew that they did not move. Her own father had taught her, walking her up to one of them when she was small and frightened. She knew that the stillness was the honor and the rule. And she had opened her eyes to find that one of them had thrown the whole of it away, the coat, the cap, the post, the 300 years, and had come running through all of it to kneel on the stone beside her and tell her he had her. "You moved." And Ewan Hale, they say, this stone man, this trained man, this corporal who had held his post through rain and mockery, and every ordinary hardship the coat could ask of him. Ewan Hale put his head down next to the little princess's head, so the medics would not see, and he wept. They took the little princess away in the first ambulance, and the square did not empty for a long time after. That is a strange thing about people, and I have watched enough of them from my table to have earned the right to say it. When something frightening happens, they do not run. They stay. 200 strangers who had come to watch a piece of pageantry stood in the cold long after the sirens had faded, not talking much, not doing anything, just standing at the railings looking at the empty gate as though if they stayed long enough someone would come out and tell them it was all right. As though they had a right to know. As though the child on the board belonged a little to all of them. Maybe she did. Maybe that is what a princess is, in the end, a child the whole country has agreed to love, so that when she falls, 200 people who will never meet her stand in the cold and wait for word. I stayed too. Of course I stayed. I did not sell a single painting that day, and I did not want to. I packed my paints away with my bad hands, and I sat on my little stool under the bare lime tree, and I waited like all the rest. Word came slow, the way it does. First there was nothing. Then there was a whisper that moved through the crowd the way a whisper does, mouth to mouth, changing a little each time. It's the youngest, it's the little one, she fell, she's breathing, she's not breathing, she's alive, no one knows. I did not trust any of it. I have watched too many rumors cross that square to trust a whisper. I trusted only what I had seen, and what I had seen was a young man run toward a thing instead of away from it, and I held on to that, because it was solid and everything else was smoke. It was near evening when the real word came, and it came the best way it could have come. It came from the palace itself. A household man, the same one, I think, though I could not swear to it, came out to the main gate and spoke to the constables, and the constables spoke to the crowd, and the word went out plain and clear at last. The princess was alive. She was in the hospital, she was stable, she had struck her head but not badly, and the thing with her heart had been caught in time and quieted. She would be kept a while and watched, but she would live. She would, in time, be well. I have heard cheering in that square for coronations and for weddings and for the ends of wars. I never heard a sound like the one that went up when the crowd learned that a little girl they had never met was going to be all right. It was not a cheer for a king. It was smaller than that and bigger. It was 200 people who had been holding their breath since 11 o'clock finally letting it go, all at once, into the cold evening air. And some of them were laughing, and some of them were crying, and the old man in the wheelchair had his daughter's hand pressed to his cheek. I cried too. I will not pretend I did not. A woman of my years is allowed her tears, and I spent them freely, sitting on my stool, thinking of a small gray heap on a cold floor, and a young man in his shirt sleeves telling her he had her. But you want to know what happened to him. Of course you do. Everyone always wants to know what happened to him. That is the part of the story that would not lie down, the part that ran in the papers for weeks, the part they argued about in every pub and market in the kingdom. Because he had broken his post. You see, it was not a simple thing, even then, even after. In the eyes of the people, it was the finest thing a man had ever done in that coat. But in the eyes of the coat itself, in the eyes of the old rule, the 300 years, Corporal Ewan Hale had done the one thing that a guard at that gate must never do. He had left his post. He had abandoned the station he was sworn to hold. And there were men, hard old men in the regiment, who said, quietly at first and then not quietly, that it did not matter why. That the rule was the rule precisely because a man could always find a reason to break it, and that the day you let a guard decide for himself when the gate mattered less than something else was the day the gate meant nothing at all. That he must be disciplined. That he must perhaps be dismissed. And there were others, most others, nearly everyone, who said that a man who would not leave his post to save a dying child was not a man you wanted holding a gate in the first place. That the whole point of the coat was to protect the family, and that Hale had protected the family, had protected the smallest and most precious of them, and that to punish him for it would be to worship the rule and forget the reason the rule was ever made. It went back and forth like that for days, and Hale himself said nothing. He was taken off the gate, pending the decision, and he did not speak to the papers, and he did not defend himself, and when they asked him, the ones who decide these things asked him formally whether he understood that he had broken his post. They say he said only one thing. They say he said, "Yes, and I would do it again." That was all. Yes, and I would do it again. No excuses, no pleading. A man who knew exactly what he had broken and would break it again tomorrow for the same reason, and stood ready to take whatever came of it. It was the king who ended it. I was not there for that, and it happened behind palace walls, so I give it to you as it came to me, but it came to me from good places, and I believe it. They say the king called Hale before him, not before a court, not before the regiment, before himself, alone or nearly. And they say the king did not speak at first of posts or rules or discipline. They say the king spoke first as a father, and thanked the young man, in a plain and broken voice, for kneeling on the cold floor beside his daughter when she was frightened and alone, and for covering her with his coat, and for telling her he had her. They say the king said, "My child opened her eyes, and the first face she saw was yours, and there is no honor I can give you that would be equal to that, but I will try." And then, they say, the king put the matter of the broken post to rest with a single sentence, and the sentence was so exactly right that it ran through the whole kingdom within the day and has never left it since. He said, "A guard who would hold his post while a child of this house lies dying on the other side of the wall is a statue, not a soldier. I have statues enough. I have statues enough." That was the end of the argument. You cannot argue with a thing said as true as that. Hale was not dismissed. He was not disciplined. In time, not right away, they did it quietly, the way that house does most things. He was raised in rank and given a place of trust, and it was let be known, without anything so vulgar as an announcement, that the corporal who broke his post was held by the king himself to have done no wrong at all, but rather the truest thing a man in that coat had ever done. But that is not the part I hold on to. Ranks and rulings, those are for the papers. I am a painter. I hold on to pictures. And the picture I hold on to came near a year later, on another cold, bright morning, when the little Princess Elowen was well again, properly well, with the color back in her face and the tired blue gone from under her eyes, and she came out through the main gate of Kestrel Court in a small red coat, holding her father's hand. The crowd was there as always. The tourists, the yellow caps, the newlyweds, though not the same ones, and the guards stood at the gate, still and gray and silent, holding their long rifles at rest, doing the thing they do, being the wonder they are. And at the left of the gate, at the post nearest my corner, stood a tall young man I knew. She saw him. Of course she saw him. A child always finds the one face in a crowd that matters. She let go of her father's hand, and she walked the whole square watching now, the king watching, everyone gone quiet. She walked up to the railings, and she stood in front of Ewan Hale, and she looked up at him. Up, the way she had when she was small and frightened, the way I had first seen her do years before. And he did not move. He could not. He was on his post, and he was a soldier and not a statue, but he was still a soldier, and a soldier holds his post. He looked out over her head the way the drill teaches, at something none of us could see, and he did not so much as blink. but I had my husband's brass telescope up to my eye. I had it up because I had known somehow that this was coming, and I was not going to miss it, not for anything in the world. And through the brass, from 40 feet away, I saw the little Princess Elowen reach through the black iron railings and take hold of the young guard's hand where it rested at his side. Just for a moment, just a small hand closing over a large one through the bars in front of the whole silent square. And I swear it on my husband's grave, and on my 41 years of watching that gate, I saw the young man's eyes move down to her. Not his head, never his head, just his eyes, the way I had seen them move for the smallest children all those years before, that one small flicker that told me he had never quite managed to lock the whole of his heart behind the drill. His eyes came down to her, her hand held his, and neither of them said a word because neither of them had to. Then she let go and stepped back and took her father's hand again, and the moment closed over like water, and the guard was stone once more, and the tourists never knew a thing had happened at all. But I knew. I had the brass to my eye, and the whole of it went into me and stayed. I am too old to paint much now. My hands have gone from bad to worse, and the fine brush is beyond me, and I have given my little folding table to a younger woman who does not yet know that the gray of that stone changes 11 times before noon. But I have painted that one picture, over and over, more times than I have painted anything, the small hand through the black railings, closing over the large one, and the eyes come down, and no one in the whole square knowing but me. I have never got the light right. I told you that at the start. 41 years, and I never once caught the gray of that stone the way it truly is. But that picture I think I got right, not the light, the other thing, the thing under the light. Because I learned, that cold Tuesday, watching a young man throw away 300 years to kneel on a cold floor beside a frightened child, I learned the thing that all my painting had been circling for 41 years and never once landed on. The stone is not the point. The stone was never the point. The point is the heart that stands so still behind it, for so long, holding itself so hard, right up until the one moment it must not.